get ready because here are some funny goofs that you can find in SpongeBob SquarePants. Can you believe that during one episode, SpongeBob forgot how to put pickles on Krabby Patties? Well, usually the first seasons of shows have some kind of errors, and SpongeBob wasn't the only one who forgot how to do things right in this episode.
I hear SquarePants.
Well, we hope you noticed something strange in this scene. Maybe it sounds strange or you didn't notice, but did you look at SpongeBob's spatula? When SpongeBob arrives at the Krusty Krab, he's wearing his awesome working hat. But in the scene in which he sees his reflection on the spatula, his hat is nowhere to be seen. Maybe the animators forgot that SpongeBob was wearing a hat in that scene, or maybe he took it off screen. Anyway, this is a funny thing to see. Also, it's very rare to see a spatula without slits, right? Well, it seems like the slits only disappear during the scene in which SpongeBob looks at the spatula, because during the rest of the episode, it is filled with them. Let's continue this episode because we found some more errors here.
I hear SquarePants is back. I'm right here, Bubble Bass.
This might be a little hard to see, but in the scene in which SpongeBob is ready to confront his nemesis during this episode, we see that something strange occurs to our protagonist while he's opening the door. If you look closely, it is possible to find that, for a brief frame, his eyes change their colors, becoming achromatic. For sure, SpongeBob got angry on this one. Do you want to have a little chat with Neptune? SpongeBob received a visit from Neptune himself in this episode from the first season of the show, and in this episode he has to demonstrate to the god of the seas itself that he has the material to become a royal cook. But let's look at some funny moments from the episode, shall we?
The light changed.
Patrick.
Hold on, I was there.
So is royal fry cook material? I don't suppose you have any proof.
When Patrick takes the picture of SpongeBob holding a golden spatula, he has his mouth wide open and there are clouds above him. However, when Patrick shows Neptune the picture, SpongeBob is smiling with his mouth shut and there are no clouds in the area. Another cool detail from the episode is that, depending on the scene, the color of Neptune's skin changes from frame to frame, adopting lighter tones every time he appears on screen. What a godly attire. Crabs a la mode. Do you believe that at one time Mr. Krabs turned the Krusty Krab into an ice rink? Having a plan to boycott the Krusty Krab's existence, he decides to turn off the heat in the restaurant. But being the mastermind of business that he is, Mr. Krabs always has a trick up his sleeve, and he uses this chance to transform the restaurant into an ice rink. After seeing this, Plankton puts up a sign saying that the chum bucket is warm and comfy. Everything goes south and Plankton gets very angry when he then sees the customers go back into the Krusty Krab with winter wear. Mr. Krabs has turned the restaurant into an ice rink complete with a Clamboni ride for children. And even SpongeBob has invented patty skates to help him, Squidward, and the customers keep their balance. One of the most curious things from this episode is that customers even prefer cold Krabby Patties. This is even better for Mr. Krabs because he doesn't need to cook them, costing him even less money. So let's take a look at which goofs we've found here.
Squidward, you're always going on about your book club. Read this.
Do not touch thermostat ever.
Seems like somebody forgot how to use the thermostat here. This might be a funny one to catch, but when Mr. Krabs tries to put the thermostat back to the temperature it was before, he moves it in the wrong direction. He was trying to warm the room, but instead the temperature decreased on the screen. Strange, right?
Bit sticky this morning.
Well, an icy restaurant has its cool things, but also its strange ones, right? If you pay attention to the cash register, there are some shots in which the machine is frozen and some others in which it's not. Ready to play some mini golf? Well, like you've seen in this episode from the 8th season of the show, SpongeBob decides to build a mini golf inside his own house. This SpongeBob guy doesn't cease to surprise us. Let's watch some cool scenes from the episode and see if we can find some goofs. Did you see what happened when SpongeBob and Patrick hit their balls into Squidward's house? For sure, bad things were supposed to happen, but when SpongeBob walks around blindfolded and destroys Squidward's things, he breaks the same window, even though the window was already broken. Bad boy SpongeBob, he got a negative note on this one for crashing Squidward's things. Did you see what happened with hole 3? Well, this third hole is a really special one because, depending on which scene from the episode you are watching, you might find that it has different obstacles. Maybe animators tried to be super original on this one. Who doesn't like chocolate bars? Well, in this episode from the 3rd season of the show, SpongeBob discovers an extremely famous magazine called Fancy Living Digest in his mail. This magazine shows the fancy lifestyles of the extremely wealthy people. Some moments after, Squidward shows up and takes the magazine, which actually was his, and SpongeBob and Patrick ask him how people can get so wealthy and gain so much money. Our favorite octopus simply answers that they are entrepreneurs and sell items, and then leaves, ordering SpongeBob to stay away from his mail. SpongeBob and Patrick, wanting to also become entrepreneurs, decide to sell chocolate bars to raise money in hopes of achieving the fancy lifestyle. What an awesome plan this is! Now that you have a little context about the episode, let's search for some goofy errors and where you can find them.
As you can see, me and chocolate no longer hang. You can keep that for $5.
Did you find something strange? Well, this might be a little error to notice, but we will explain it briefly. Between all the clients that SpongeBob and Patrick visit, there is one that caught our attention the most. Why? Because maybe it's not the best idea to sell chocolate bars to someone who has had problems with their weight. Well, in this case, the customer shows both SpongeBob and Patrick a picture of himself having that problem. And here is where the animation error comes in. When the customer shows a picture to both of them, the picture has something special on it because depending on the frame that's shown, it has the word years written on it. This is strange because depending on the frame in which it's shown, that word appears and disappears from the photo. What a strange detail to start the video with.
Yelling! You just can't wait for me to die, can you? They're selling chocolate!
Mary plays a big part in this episode, but we found an animation error regarding the conversation that our protagonists have with her. Did you find anything strange happening to SpongeBob? In case you've missed it, SpongeBob's front pores are missing. It might sound dangerous, but would you let SpongeBob and Patrick paint the inside of your house? In this old episode, both SpongeBob and Patrick are tearing the Krusty Krab down and getting themselves hurt because Squidward, using his evil and twisted IQ, tricked them into thinking that it would attract customers. When Mr. Krabs figures this out, he thinks about one super special secret assignment. He wants them to paint the inside of his house. Maybe he's underestimating their talent as artists. After that, our favorite boss tells them that the paint they're using is permanent and it will not come off, so even the smallest drop could be dangerous. As they go inside the house, SpongeBob sees that Mr. Krabs has so many possessions and tells Patrick he decides to move them first. Patrick says that there's no need to move the things because they're not getting paid to move them. Well, maybe Krabs had too much confidence in them. But outside of painting, let's see which funny scenes this episode had.
I to paint the inside of me house! I'll have your ear ends cut off! fireplace. So have fun with the job.
This might not be the first time that this happens in a SpongeBob episode, but did you notice something strange happening to Mr. Krabs' house door? Well, in case you didn't notice, the first time the door opens, the motion goes from left to right, while the second time that Krabs opens that same door, it opens from right to left. Same door, two completely different ways.
But Mr. Krabs said...
Forget what Mr. Krabs said. Every paint comes off with something.
Did it work?
Nope.
Until now, we thought that SpongeBob and Patrick were painting Mr. Krabs' house, right? Or at least that's what we're supposed to believe. Well, if you look carefully at this scene, when Patrick and SpongeBob try to wash the paint off the dollar with the laundry machine, the wall doesn't have any paint on it. This is strange because the whole motive of the episode is having both SpongeBob and Patrick painting Mr. Krabs' house. But maybe the animators forgot about that for a couple of frames. For sure, Mr. Krabs didn't hire the best workers in town. Number 3, Bossy Boots. It's been a long time since the last time we included an episode that has Pearl as the protagonist in one of our videos, but this is a great one to see. In this classic from the second season of the show, Mr. Krabs' daughter Pearl gets an important job as Krusty Krab's newest employee. Having the strong personality she has, she's ready to make things change in her father's restaurant, and of course, this might cause some trouble. Let's look at some cool scenes.
My cuddly executive buddy reduces stress for only 5 easy payments at $9.95. What would we do without these beautiful $20 sea unicorn wall hangers?
Usually, unicorns have one horn to honor their race, right? Well, in this scene from the episode, we can see that there's a picture of a green unicorn next to Mr. Krabs. But a couple of moments after, when Mr. Krabs makes his point signaling the unicorn, it doesn't have any horns. Well, at least we can say that it's changed from unicorn to seahorse. And continuing with strange things that happen in this episode, and with things that also happened in this same office, we also found one more error here at this same scene and location. When SpongeBob enters the room, we see that Mr. Krabs has an anti-stress toy in his desk. But when SpongeBob comes over and the camera zooms, we can't see any toy there. Maybe Pearl put too much effort on changing things down at the Krusty Krab. That strange things happened there. Number 4, Shell of a Man. Did you know that SpongeBob supplanted Mr. Krabs' identity for one episode? This is probably one of the funniest episodes from Season 4, and for us is a very special one, because guess what? Even if it was hard, we were able to find some animation errors in it. Ready to watch them?
Wow! My entire arm disintegrated!
I still got it. Be a good lad, go get your station in shipshape, and leave an old sea dog to revel in his memories.
Mr. Krabs is a really strong man, isn't he? Well, he's so strong that after SpongeBob punches him in the gut, SpongeBob's arm disintegrates. Even if this looks cool, animators may have forgotten that SpongeBob's arm had been broken some minutes ago, because in the next frame, his arm is back perfectly located as it should be. Maybe Krabs wasn't as strong as we thought at first.
Perfection!
Is number 5's order ready yet, SpongeBob?
Just a second, Squidward.
This scene goes for all the Krabby Patty lovers. Right at the start of the episode, we witness SpongeBob preparing the Krabby Patty number 5, right? Well, this might be the Krusty Krab's most special burger, because if you look at the frames in which this hamburger appears, the burger switches ingredients from one scene to another. Well, Mrs. Puff might not be the best driver at home for once. Well, demolition derbies should be hard if your work consists in teaching others how to properly drive. Or at least that's what we thought. But Mrs. Puff demonstrated in this episode that this is not true. And for sure, this episode left some funny scenes for us to analyze.
Mrs. Puff, what should I...
Why are you still?
Alive!
Put it in drive. Thanks, Mrs. Puff, you're the best.
The Cruncher might be one of the scariest competitors in this demolition derby, but did you notice something happening to his characteristic shark fin? Well, in the scene where he's chasing SpongeBob, he has a fin on his back, much like every other shark in existence. But jumping forward a couple frames after, the fin has disappeared. Well, he might be the first shark in Bikini Bottom's history to lose his back fin.
Hands at 10 and 2, and finally, fly!
What happened?
Well, for sure, SpongeBob is a very unorthodox driver. This scene might confuse many watching the episode because when SpongeBob is getting ready to drive his boat and escape from the other competitor's hits, he lifts his left foot ready to push the gas. This is strange because when later on the camera zooms to the bottom of his car, it is his right foot that's pressing the gas. SpongeBob for sure is a great chef, but what about being a writer? Well, in this episode, Mr. Krabs had our protagonist working not only as Krusty Krab's best hamburger maker, he also turned SpongeBob into a great writer for his own newspaper. Well, even if SpongeBob is learning a new job, we found some scenes that had some mistakes in them. Let's take a look at them quickly.
And he appears to be waiting for the bus. This is the kind of breaking story my readers are waiting for. Patrick Star, I'm Scoop SquarePants from the Krabby Chronicle. Everyone's wondering, what bus are you taking today?
SpongeBob! What's the meaning of this?
Meaning of what, Mr. Krabs?
Local resident watches poll? No one's gonna pay to read this malarkey?
This mistake passed right before our eyes when we were watching the episode. But hey, starting a new job is a really hard task to complete. So let's look at this scene where SpongeBob takes some pictures of Patrick for Mr. Krabs' newly created newspaper. When SpongeBob takes those pictures of Patrick, our favorite starfish doesn't seem to be in his happiest mood, but a couple of moments after, when Krabs is arguing with SpongeBob about how he did his job and how he wrote the newspaper, the photos of Patrick that appear show him with a big smile. Well, this is funny because we didn't remember that Patrick wasn't as happy the first time SpongeBob took photos of him, but for sure it is something that animators also forgot. But some more scenes from the episode also caught our attention.
Plankton's chum made of your chums? The chum bucket serves your friends in more ways than one? What? Who's to blame for this? Who?
Plankton is usually a pretty evil mastermind, but this time he tried to deceive all of us. When Bikini Bottom's resident villain reads the fake article about the bad service that he offers in the chum bucket, the article reads, "Plankton's chum are made of your chums." But when Plankton reads it, he adds a line that doesn't really appear in the newspaper. He says the chum bucket serves your friends in more ways than one. Well, this may be a strategy to make the article more dramatic. Let's continue with more episodes of SpongeBob having multiple funny professions. Well, this episode might have SpongeBob working to promote the Krusty Krab around the whole town of Bikini Bottom. But that doesn't exclude itself from having some funny and questionable scenes that we can talk about.
It's eat or be eaten. The giant patty has eaten my buddy!
Relax, Patrick, it's me. This is just a costume.
Cough him up, you monster!
Patrick is for sure a very visceral starfish, but we had to have our eyes really open to catch the mistake that happens during this scene. Were you able to catch it? Well, when Patrick is fighting SpongeBob while our protagonist is wearing the Krusty Krab costume, SpongeBob drops some flyers to the ground. A couple of moments after, when the camera zooms out of the two friends fighting each other, the flyers are nowhere to be found. Maybe Patrick is so strong that he made them disappear.
Time, where have you been? I'm out of here.
Fire up the grill, laddie, and get ready for customers. And Patrick, buy something or get out.
Oh, boy!
Squidward was really angry in this episode due to the way that Mr. Krabs handled things, but his anger left us with a cool mistake that even we weren't able to catch at first. Well, when Squidward exits the Krusty Krab, he manifests his discomfort by throwing his employee hat onto the ground. Such a bad employee, isn't he? Fast forward a couple of scenes later, and when everybody is ready to enter the Krusty Krab right before Mr. Krabs chooses his last customer, and poof, the hat is nowhere to be found. Seems like SpongeBob doesn't know when he's crossing the line with his friends, especially when things involve Squidward. This episode has Squidward going to the same boating school as SpongeBob in order to learn how to properly drive a boat. This sounds like a wacky adventure from our two favorite protagonists, but this adventure also had its fair share of errors. So, let's look at them together.
I have it, Squidward. You gave it to me to leave you alone yesterday. Squidward, you can have the $5 back. Mr. Krabs says
I
that...
don't care what Mr. Krabs says!
SpongeBob's clothing is the main suspect for many of the animation errors that we can find in the show, but did you catch this one? Well, after Squidward offers $5 to SpongeBob in exchange for leaving him alone and being able to enjoy the morning, SpongeBob gets scared for a second. It is that precise moment where SpongeBob's belt changes from black to white. What a cool error to find in this episode.
Everything I know, and then we can...
We won't be doing anything because there is no we. Understand?
Quiet in the front, please.
Remember that we told you that SpongeBob's clothing is the main suspect when searching for some animation errors? Well, this scene had a cool one to find regarding his belt again. When everybody is sitting in the boating class, you can see that SpongeBob's side belt disappears. Who's ready to get sun bleached? Well, this might sound like your typical beach, summer-oriented episode, but having a great time during summer doesn't exclude you from having some animation errors, right? Let's check them out.
I used Patrick's tanning booth, and I stayed under too long.
Oh, this is too precious. You're sun bleached.
This is a really hard one, but have you found it? Well, when Squidward is shouting at SpongeBob about how bad his dry state looks, Squidward's neck disappears for a couple of frames. This might be a fast one, but for sure is another proof of Squidward needing to control his anger. Let's move on to another scene. Somebody should revise how people write their signs in Bikini Bottom. This spelling error might have been overlooked by many of us, but if you look closely at the Bikini Bottom Summer Shindig, the word shindig is misspelled because even if the sign had to use the word shindig, it is written as shinding. He might not be the best driver around, but SpongeBob impressed Mrs. Puff with his knowledge of boating history on this one. Well, even if SpongeBob's knowledge surprised us all on this one, we found some cool and funny scenes to show you. Let's take a look.
It's working! She's noticing my vast knowledge. I can now taste the sweet, sweet lamination of a fresh boating license.
After demonstrating his knowledge about boating history, SpongeBob says the next phrase to Mrs. Puff. I can now taste the sweet, sweet lamination of a fresh boating license. Well, if you looked at SpongeBob at that same moment, his teeth turn yellow for a small frame. Bragging about something is never a cool thing to do.
Oh, my gravy! He even knows the hearty laugh. He has been doing his homework.
Ha ha ha!
We saved the best for last, and this might be the hardest error to catch in today's video. Did you notice anything strange happening to SpongeBob's tongue? Well, if you look at our hero's tongue when he is maniacally laughing, there is a small moment where his tongue disjoints from his mouth and it's seen flying through the air. Do you know who Squilliam is? Well, Squidward's main rival made a big appearance on this episode, and of course to make Squidward's life really annoying. First appearing in the episode Band Geeks, Squilliam is represented as a rich and triumphant version of Squidward Squidward, but in this episode, he came here with one mission and only one, confronting Squidward about his newly discovered 5-star restaurant. Let's take a look.
We're all ready to be dazzled by your 5-star restaurant.
Wait, Squilliam, I've got to explain.
As a 5-star restaurant?
Funny, right? Squidward doesn't seem to know how to run away from trouble. But what we're here for is to find some funny and special animation errors. So, what we've found here? Soon you'll know. If you looked at this scene slowly enough, you might have discovered that something strange is happening while Squilliam visits Squidward's restaurant. Just take a second look and see if you are able to find something. Well, in case you haven't seen anything, when Squilliam arrives at Squidward's 5-star restaurant, it's sunset, but when he's starting to eat his meal, suddenly it's nighttime. This is weird, right? This might surprise you, but this is not the only strange thing that you can find in this scene. Because when Squidward says, "Would you get out of here?" the sky seems to be in the daytime. For sure, days have a different rhythm in Bikini Bottom. Nonetheless, to camouflage this error, the animators decided to reduce the brightness of the exterior so it's more nightly suited. But this is not the only funny thing we found here. Let's take another look at another funny scene.
The horrible, sad truth is, I'm a cashier too.
Well, this scene might only be for die-hard fans only, but look at Mr. Krabs' eyes. If you've seen the show for a long time, you'll have noticed that Mr. Krabs' eyes change color for a brief moment during this scene. Usually they have a very characteristic pale green color, but during this scene they're completely white. Seems like our last episode wasn't the only one with Squilliam causing trouble. In contrast with the last episode, Squidward didn't try to pretend that he had a luxurious restaurant in this one because he tried to prepare his house for a TV show. At the start of the episode, Squidward is watching the famous TV show House Fancy, a TV program that encourages inhabitants of Bikini Bottom to show their houses and show everyone who has the fanciest ones. But like usually happens to our favorite octopus, Squidward's day is ruined when he hears that the program's first guest is none other than Squilliam Fancyson. Another time that Squidward has to face his worst enemy. After some chaotic events and funny adventures, Squidward ends up with his house destroyed, but winning the trophy of House Fancy Prince of the Year. Like people always say, you have to make big sacrifices to reach big goals. But we have found some strange scenes that we wanted to show you to see if you're able to find some errors.
Hey, Mickey dear. Well, toodaloo, Squidward. Enjoy the program.
Squidward looked like he was having a peaceful time this morning, enjoying a great cup of tea. And that's exactly what we have to take a look at, the cup of tea. At the beginning of the scene, we see that Squidward sets his teacup down to answer the telephone. Much to his surprise, he's shocked to learn that Squilliam is on House Fancy. When the camera zooms out to Squidward, we see that again he has the same cup of tea that he left on the table before. For sure, he wasn't the happiest person ever to hear from Squilliam, but this is a really funny scene to discover. But this is not the only error we found on this over-the-top episode, so let's continue watching.
This may take a while. Just sit back and relax.
What the? A whirlpool bath elevator?
We know that Squilliam has a pretty big ego, right? Or at least that's what his elevator tells him. Well, if you took notice of the background, there is a small difference between the three pictures on the back. Two of those have Squilliam having a very big and hairy unibrow, while the other one doesn't have it. Did you know that Patrick disguises himself as a woman to not get kicked out of Bikini Bottom? After a strange morning in Bikini Bottom, Bottom, one strange guy told Patrick to get out of town after showing him a brilliant and strange briefcase. Fearing that he would be a paid assassin, Patrick thought about one very strange solution: dressing as a woman. This caught the attention of many male inhabitants of Bikini Bottom, and Patricia became a star all across our favorite underwater city. But let's look at the animation errors we found here.
I gotta get out of town!
To do something horrible to me before I'll let you throw Patrick out of town.
Patrick!
You forgot your flyer.
Get out of town.
Here we have the first interesting detail of this episode. When the businessman first shows his pamphlet about the marvelous resort he works for, the sign reads, "Get out of town to beautiful Seashores Resort." And at the end of the episode, the same pamphlet reads, "Get out of town to beautiful Sunny Shores Resort." This might be a change of that text, or maybe it's just an animation error. We will never know.
There'll be no such thing as opening too early, me boy. Excuse us, miss. Huh?
Mr. Krabs might have lost something more than his eyes in this scene. If you look closely at Mr. Krabs, when the camera gets close to him while his eyes explode, he suddenly misses his left arm. Well, it seems like Mr. Krabs has a way to make money out of everything. In the start of the episode, SpongeBob starts to fill a hole that he finds in the Krusty Krab's wall with toothpaste. This starts to make Mr. Krabs uncomfortable and decides to make a plan out of this when he sees the hole of the wall breaking. And his fabulous idea is to create a drive-through using a simple menu written on napkins and a microphone made of tin cans. This might be a great plan, but it comes with its fair share of errors. Let's take a look.
Mr. Krabs, what you doing?
Oh, hi, SpongeBob.
Did you notice something strange in the Krusty Krab? Well, we might be right at the start of the episode, but for those who've watched the show throughout its whole history, you will have noticed that the Krusty Krab is missing its trademark antenna. Such a cool detail, isn't it?
These marks don't! Hey, watch it, will ya? I just had this thing repainted.
Car accidents are always a big thing to worry about, right? Well, in this scene, when both the blue and green fishes collide with their respective cars, the green fish's arm turns orange for a second. Have you ever pictured Patrick working as an advertising director at the Chum Bucket? At the beginning of the episode, Plankton's beloved computer, Karen, suggests that he advertise his product. Then, being the evil mastermind he is, Plankton hangs a sign that reads, "Chum is metabolic fuel." Even if he has one of the greatest IQs in all Bikini Bottom, this slogan doesn't seem to catch up until Patrick walks nearby and changes the sign to "Chum is fum." This seems to connect with people and starts to attract them, thus making Plankton hire Patrick as his new advertising director. Such a bizarre episode. If this wasn't bizarre enough, let's look at some funny scenes from the episode.
Let's see. Q, no P, no... here it is, L.
Seems like something strange was happening to the Chum Bucket while creating the sign. Have you caught it? Well, when Plankton is looking inside the box of letters to make the sign, the door of the Chum Bucket has disappeared. For sure, Plankton wanted to renew the Chum Bucket on this episode, but losing its door might be too much.
Here's your Chum Bucket Supreme. Enjoy.
Well, that fish was a pretty strange one, wasn't it? If you paid enough attention, the fish that asks for lunch had a red t-shirt. But after the camera moves and zooms back to him, his t-shirt is blue. Patrick discovered his royal blood in this episode and ended up being a really, really bad monarch. Let's take a look at some of the best moments of the episode. A starfish from the royal ministry comes to visit Patrick for a special delivery, but Patrick initially mistakes him for a mad librarian and hides. This starfish announces that he has a gift for Patrick, but being the strange guy he is, he does not trust him and hides. Later on in the episode, we will discover that this present was a present for Patrick, and this is a demonstration that Patrick has an uncovered tree showing Patrick to be descended from a king, thus making him the official king. Here, with all this royal implication, we find one of the first Easter eggs that are in this episode. One of the characters that we can see is named Yorick. Why is this important? Being a royal-flavored episode, Yorick is a character that appeared in one of the most important plays in history, Hamlet. What a cool reference! But this is not the only historical or philosophical reference that we can find in this episode. Let's take a look at another one. At the end of the episode, when Patrick gives his crown back, the man from the royal ministry says the famous phrase, "With great power comes great possibility." This is a phrase from French philosopher Voltaire. This phrase is used in many cartoon media and was famous due to its use in films much like Spider-Man. Well, this is a reflection of from Patrick becoming a king to SpongeBob becoming super wealthy. It seems like everybody is changing their social position in SpongeBob. In this episode, both SpongeBob and Patrick find a clam choking on a pearl. Being the great neighbors they are, they help this mysterious clam, and they mistake the pearl for a volleyball. After they go to a volleyball court, some workers offer a small fortune to SpongeBob for it. This small fortune ended up being some billions of dollars that were delivered to SpongeBob. After this, SpongeBob and Patrick use a portion of the money to buy lifetime supplies of strawberry gum at the Bikini Bottom Mall. Because who doesn't like an endless supply of treats for their whole life? Later, at an ice cream stand, SpongeBob overhears another fish complaining that he is short on change, so he offers the fish money, and they become his friends. SpongeBob is so overtaken by fame that he forgets Patrick is his best friend, and he keeps giving money to his rich friends. Sadly, SpongeBob got blinded by the money and forgot who his best friend was. Pretty bad, SpongeBob. With all the themes of the episode reviewed, let's check out the cultural references we were able to find here. The episode itself is a parody of the parable of the prodigal son, in which the protagonist, reflected in the figure of SpongeBob, gains an increasingly large amount of wealth, but then they quickly lose it all and have to go back to their former life. This also is really bad, since SpongeBob nearly lost his friendship with Patrick due to this. Like we said before, with great power or great wealth comes a great responsibility. Also, there is a moment in which the characters use a movement known as the slime lick maneuver. This is a reference to the famous Heimlich maneuver, which is used to help a choking person. Did you know that the Krusty Krab had its own newspaper? Well, in this classic from season 6, Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob to write juicy stories for his newspaper. At the start of the episode, Mr. Krabs finds out that there have been no new customers, and he invested some money in putting an ad in the local newspaper about the Krusty Krab. Being as careful with his money as he is, he sees that people are buying a different newspaper called the Bottom Feeder. A buyer informs him that the newspaper in which he put his ad is no longer interesting and that the stories that they write are not true. Due to this, Mr. Krabs decides to make his own newspaper, and who would be a better writer to choose than SpongeBob himself, giving him newer responsibilities. We found some special moments in this episode, so let's look at them. During this episode, there is a board over the Krusty Krab sign that reads, "Over 8 bajillion served." This is a reference to the McDonald's signs, which read billions and billions served. For sure, Mr. Krabs has his business in a pretty good position, because he compares himself to real-life fast food giants like McDonald's. Also, we have one reference to an old SpongeBob episode, because the health inspector who shuts down the chum bucket is the same one who appears in the episode Nasty Patty. Or SpongeBob, he broke his spatula on this one. During the start of this episode, SpongeBob is having an intense day at work in the Krusty Krab. Suddenly, one one customer orders a monster Krabby Patty, and SpongeBob tries to flip it, resulting in his spatula breaking. This is pretty bad because without his trademark spatula, SpongeBob loses all his powers to be a great chef. Even if this looks like a pretty big drama to deal with, we found very interesting moments in this episode. In one moment of the episode, SpongeBob breaks the fourth wall, mentioning the episode this happens when suddenly another SpongeBob arises from the floor and says the phrase, "All that glitters isn't gold." Seems like SpongeBob has a big connection with his audience. Also, continuing with the episode, some theories say that the hand that delivers the monster Krabby Patty might belong to the show's animatic editor, Steve Downes. Everyone loves to come back to his roots, right? Well, in this episode, Sandy goes back to Texas and brings a flea back to her dome. This might sound funny, but bringing that flea to Bikini Bottom causes Sandy to scratch and bite her fur, much to Sandy's annoyance. Later on, we discover that this was due to the same flea who Sandy brought with herself after visiting a science convention, causing big trouble all around Bikini Bottom. But even if this flea was running rampant across Bikini Bottom, we found some really interesting details in this episode. Let's look at them. The scene in which SpongeBob and Patrick cry tears on each other is similar to a scene that we were able to see in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, where the same thing happens to them after they miss the paddy wagon. Also, in the scene in which Squidward is power walking, the song he's listening to is a reference to a jazz song that you can find in a horror movie classic known as The Thing. Who doesn't want to impress his grandma? In this episode, Plankton receives a special visit from one of his most beloved family members, his grandma. Well, Grandma Plankton decided to pay a visit to her grandson to celebrate her 90th birthday. But such an important celebration needs a great location. What plan did Plankton's evil mind create for this occasion? As a familiar oath, Plankton promised his grandma that he would own the Krusty Krab by the time she reaches 90. So he has to lie to her and fulfill his desire. For once, Mr. Krabs decided to collaborate with Plankton and give him control of the Krusty Krab, even if it was for a couple of days. Now that you know about the episode, let's look at some scenes. It is not the first time that we see some typing errors on some signs of the Krusty Krab, especially related to the Krabby Patties. Were you able to catch the error on this one? In the sign that says Galley Grub, the name of Bikini Bottom's most famous hamburger has a spelling error. Instead of saying Krabby Patty with a Y, it says Krabby Patty with an I. Well, maybe animators forgot the name of one of their best creations. This might not be the first time we see this error, but we chose this episode today. Let's move on with some more content. Adoring an old plankton lady may look like nightmare fuel, but do you find any errors on this one? Well, when all the Bikini Bottomites are adoring Plankton's grandma, we see that Mr. Krabs loses his eyelashes. You know that there's one new dish in the Krusty Krab menu? In this episode, Mr. Krabs wants to open the winter season with a brand new product on his menu, a soup to warm people on cold winter nights. This attracts many new customers, including a group of bohemian and hippie fish that come to conquer the restaurant. This not only raises the money that the Krusty Krab gets, but also gives SpongeBob a new bunch of funny friends to share adventures with. Even if this episode is funny, it also has some errors. Let's look at them. SpongeBob has a great talent for cooking new dishes, but did you find anything strange in this scene? When SpongeBob jumps into the soup, we see that he's swimming with all his newest companions and all the ingredients. We see that there's some tomato inside the soup. This is strange because there's not a single moment in which SpongeBob uses tomatoes to cook the soup. Maybe animators wanted to give their own twist to this fantastic dish. We found one very curious error regarding this episode, but this is not an animation error. There's a moment in which Mr. Krabs says that he's closing the Krusty Krab, but in the Malay dub, this is wrong because he says, "I am closing the Krabby Patty." What would be the perfect present if you had to give one to your best friend? In this episode, Patrick decided that the best way to demonstrate his friendship with SpongeBob was to give him a very big glob of gum for Best Friends Day. This sounds funny, right? The story also involves a robotic butler scaring SpongeBob and many other funny details that we don't want to spoil for you because we want you to enjoy the full SpongeBob experience. Let's watch some scenes, shall we?
Best Friends Day, Best Friends Day, Best Friends Day, Best Friends Day!
Patrick! Happy best friend! Whoa.
Maybe Patrick had some superpowers, or at least that's what it looks like in this scene. After looking at this scene a couple of times, we discovered that something special was happening in this frame where Patrick is rolling his big bag of gum. Well, we invite you to take a small look at his feet here. If you thought that Patrick's feet aren't touching the ground while he's running, congratulations, because you're right on this one. Patrick can't stop to surprise everyone.
Wait, Sandy. The more you touch it, the angrier it gets.
Oh, that's just crazy talk.
SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship might be the protagonist of this episode, but do you know what happens to Sandy in this scene? Well, this is a pretty hard error to find, and it cost us multiple times of re-watching to catch it. So let's explain it. When Sandy lifts her arm, there is a strange detail on her spacesuit. If you look at the suit closely, the color from the bars that are wrapped around Sandy's arm change for a brief frame. Do you know that Squidward very nearly ended SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship in the very first season of the show? After getting very angry with both of our main protagonists over laughing about a fantastic souffle that he made one beautiful morning, Squidward decided that he had had enough of SpongeBob and Patrick's jokes and laughs. And what's a better plan to end this than to break their friendship? Squidward for sure has an evil mind, but will he achieve that? We leave the pleasure of discovering that to you. Now let's jump into some cool scenes.
Hi, Patrick.
Lately, socks have jumped in priority when we are talking about fashion. Did you find something strange in SpongeBob's socks? We're calling you fashion experts. Well, in case you haven't found anything, there is a small frame in which SpongeBob's socks are missing a couple of the colored stripes they usually have. SpongeBob is a true fashion icon, but this is not the only scene we've rescued from this old episode. This detail might be here because this is one of the first SpongeBob episodes to ever be created, but don't you miss something on that window? Well, this might be strange, but in this scene, SpongeBob's windows don't have any glass on them, even if they're opened. Also, SpongeBob's eyelashes are missing on this one. SpongeBob has always been so concerned with the environment, but this episode left him to embrace his more natural side. Tired of the stress that his normal life causes him, SpongeBob decides that it's time to abandon all his material possessions and follow one of his dreams, to be like a jellyfish and live in the utmost wilderness. He just wants to be one with nature itself. Such a wild adventure came with some spicy scenes, so let's watch them.
What have I done? I had a great life and friends, and I gave all of that up.
Welcome home, SpongeBob!
You guys are the best. I made a huge mistake. Please forgive me.
Something about Patrick looks weird in this scene, right? Well, after watching SpongeBob's comeback at the end of the episode, we noticed that Patrick undergoes a significant change in this concrete scene. If you look closely at his face when SpongeBob is entering his house and everyone greets him, Patrick loses his mouth for a couple of frames. Poor Patrick, he might have screamed too much on this one.
Here, Patrick. Have a Krabby Patty. There he is, Patrick. Say you're live.
Why, thank you, Sandy.
Sandy also seems to undergo some changes in this episode. In case you didn't pay enough attention to Sandy's neck, there is something special happening to that part of her body. What's the mystery behind this scene? Well, if you're a longtime fan of the show, you will know that Sandy's neck usually has a dark brown tone. But in this scene, her color is similar to the one from her cheeks. Such a cool detail to find. Well, there you have it, SpongeBob fans. These are some animation errors that we were able to find in your favorite show. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel so we can provide you with even more SpongeBob content. Goodbye!